Hey everyone, and welcome to the Inclusion in Your Lab podcast, where we talk about the fusion of design, guest experience, and innovation. Today, I have the special pleasure of talking to a very good friend of mine from across the pond, Mr. Gavin Neate. So, Gavin, if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute to introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Are you going to dub on lots of applause when you were, "It's Gavin Neate"? And I'm like, I'm expecting some sort of canned applause in the background. It would sound pretty cool. I always love chatting to folk across the pond because it just seems more professional when an American introduces you. I don't know. Is that the way it works? I don't know.
That's funny because that's how I feel about British people. You know, it sounds so prim and proper, and
I can do that.
So much more sophisticated.
I don't know how we love each other for what we can create. That's the way to look at it. Absolutely, what a pleasure to be here. My background's a little bit weird because I'm actually we've had a bit of a power cut here. I'm on the northwest coast of Scotland, so it's like not as nice and warm as cozy as it would normally be in professional. I've just got one light just beaming right into my face, so I'm going to make the most of it without makeup, who have just gone out. So I'll just deal with it. But I better introduce myself. I'm Gavin Neate. I'm 57. I have been involved in disability for a number of years now, probably 30 odd years, I guess. I am mad passionate about equity and creating balance and redressing the balance that has so often been the other way around. I believe that disabled people should have the same rights as everybody else, and equity should create a balance where other people's discrimination is removed. And I've been doing that for a long time, and I did it for Guide Dogs Blind, and I did it with my own company, and I truly believe I'll take it to my grave with me, fighting for the rights of everybody.
That's wonderful. We were talking before we got on the recording here about how we kind of met on LinkedIn, and we became kind of kindred spirits almost immediately. And so it's just so awesome to have you on here. And as you said off camera, which I thought was so true, we've had so many good conversations without hitting record that we wanted to kind of hit record and do this live. So I'm so excited to do that. And one of the things that I kind of drive home all the time in my content, on my podcast, anyone that will listen, is the market size that we're facing here in the U.S. when it comes to disabled travelers. But you all across the pond, since I already said that and you like that.
You just did it on purpose. Use y'all.
I did.
Y'all across the pond. You're hamming up.
Anyway, I'm sorry for dropping a y'all. I live in Virginia now, and the South is catching up with me. I guess I lived here 10 years, so I guess that's what happens. But tell me a little bit about the Purple Pound and how that whole initiative, because that's something that maybe people here haven't heard about, but I think it's such a cool initiative and such a good way of looking at this whole community that we're both a part of.
Yeah, I think if you were to break down, it seems fairly obvious when it's pointed out, but if you were to break down demographics of where money is spent, and you could say money is spent by people in their 20s, or money is spent by the grey pound, which is sort of like people who are sort of retired, or you could say that money is spent by men of a certain age, and you can pretty much guarantee that if you pick up one of those old paper catalogues, that everybody will go to a different section within the catalogue. Children will go at the back where the toys are, and whatever it might be. And really, it's just a reflection of the demographic of disabled people spending money. Now, disabled people aren't spending money on just specific things. They spend money on everything because they are just people who are disabled, or people who have a medical condition or a challenge with their mobility, whatever it might be. And if you start looking at that figure and working out just exactly how much disabled people are spending, well, when you consider 1 in 5 people are disabled, maybe even more than that. And if you consider there's like 1.3 billion disabled people on the planet, and then you consider that pretty much everybody, certainly a large proportion of people at some point in their life will be disabled, and pretty much guaranteed, without having the figures, that everybody is going to know somebody who's disabled. Now, that could be a parent, it could be a child, it could be themselves, it could be a partner. Everybody is connected to disability. And of course, if you have a child who's a wheelchair user or a child who's neurodiverse and you want to go to a restaurant or on a holiday or a hotel or wherever it might be, you are going to be accompanying them. And that's a non-disabled person with a disabled person. So the actual money that's connected to disability and disability service provision is massive, and it's called in the UK, and where I think is where it started, it's called the Purple Pound, which is just a reflection of how much that value is worth to the world.
Yeah, yeah, and yet, what is the valuation of the Purple Pound these days? It's a staggering number, isn't it?
Well, so I believe. I mean, I think it's really hard to put a finger on what its actually value is worldwide. But somebody said to me once $8 trillion, and it's just like phenomenal. But in the UK alone, it's 274 billion a year. It's a lot of money, but take into consideration that's every pound. We're talking pounds here, that is spent by somebody who's disabled or by a family member who's spending money at the same time as a disabled person is requiring a service. So £274 billion, whatever that is in dollars, 350,000 million billion dollars, whatever it might be. That's a lot of money that's out there potentially obtainable by the businesses that are actually providing those services.
And yet, they're not really going after those funds. That's something we talked about in one of our previous chats, not on a podcast. It's just the fact that go ahead and tell that story, because I thought you explained it so amazingly about, if it were buried 6 feet under the ground or 6 inches. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it was just off the cuff. I love an analogy, and I think when we're on a flow and we're talking, you just come up with things that, because you have such a depth of knowledge of this subject. When you're talking to somebody else who has a depth of knowledge, that you use analogies that you know the other person is going to get. And it was just, if there was a field near your house and you knew that 6 foot underneath the ground in that field was $1 billion. And somebody guaranteed you that it was out there, I guarantee you by the following morning you'd be out there with diggers digging up that field because you knew the money was there. And if people repeated that across the whole of the United States, there would just be nothing but fields getting dug up and people going, yeah, I found $1 million. And everybody would be very happy because $1 million is there. But that doesn't seem to happen when it comes to the disability money. It's like, we know these people are spending money, but nobody is digging it up. And if they are, I haven't seen them going, do you know what? We never used to provide services for disabled people, and then we did. And look at my new Ferrari. And you don't hear people saying that. And you might hear somebody saying it when they provide services just for disabled people, like if somebody creates a new wheelchair. But that generally is money that the disabled person is spending and on a tool that's actually just trying to balance their lives out. It's not necessarily the normal everyday money that everybody spends. So I believe that if we were to prove that this money existed, if there was a company that went, yep, I invested $100,000 and now look, I'm making $1 million a year out of that 100,000 because I'm now providing services for disabled people. Well, we need to prove it. We need to physically, tangibly, actually prove the money exists.
Yeah. It's I think oftentimes people get stuck with what is occurring, right? And they don't always ask why. And they don't always go to how. That's something that you taught me as well, which was really interesting.
I'm a very wise guy. I've been on the planet a long time. I've got all these little extras that I've learned. Yeah, that what, why, how is a really interesting one. And I think you wouldn't have to go too far back into our past, probably before social media to a certain extent, where you'd get three people in a room together and one might be talking about what was going wrong. Another one would say, "Oh, why is that going wrong?" And another one would go, "Well, come on, how are we going to fix it?" And those three people, or 5 or 10 or whatever, would all get together and then actually fix the problem. But I think over the past few years, we've just become a little bit too disparate, where the person who says what's wrong has a really loud voice on social media and is able to say what's wrong, and everybody goes, "Yeah, that's terrible, and it just generates lots of anger amongst the people. And so, nobody ever says, or if they do, it's very quiet. Nobody actually wants to hear them say, why did it go wrong? And when somebody's looking for somebody else to say that's terrible, that shouldn't be happening, they don't really want to hear somebody say, why did it happen? Because that means that it detracts from their anger. They don't have a chance to vent their spleen if they're suddenly going, you mean I actually have to understand why something happened? Because if I have to understand why something happened, I can't apportion blame in the way that I was feeling right now, and I won't be surrounded by people who are all agreeing me and telling me how terrible it is that somebody's treated me badly. So we have to get to the stage where we used to be, where we would say, this is wrong. Why is it wrong? What are we going to do and how are we going to fix it? And I think that's a big problem in society just now. Those three people, as I put in a blog about it, those three people no longer talk to each other.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Like, what's the cause of that?
That is a really great question. So I'm not going to say I know the answer. I'm going to say that social media has meant that if you post that something terrible's happened to you, you will be surrounded by your party, your friends, your followers who will all agree that that's terrible, and they'll all share your anger. And the why people have always been more academic, and they will just go away somewhere and study something and then get a white paper, what we call a white paper. You might have it in States as well. They will write something down. It'll be an academic paper about recording something, and then it will just get filed away somewhere, because you need the person who's got the energy and the action in the what. The what person isn't a bad person. They're just somebody that has misdirected their what into clicks and likes and followers, and maybe generating income from the anger that they can share with everybody else. But the why person is maybe funded in a different way, but they do an academic paper and then it gets written up. And I've always said in the UK, we will have an amazing record of where it went wrong, because we're brilliant in the UK at recording stuff. We always have been. We're fantastic at recording stuff. And I think we will have a brilliant record of that. In fact, universities in the States are very similar. They will record what's going wrong. But it very seldom gets to and in fact, you even think about this, the mad professor, the entrepreneur or the mechanic who's in a shed at the bottom of their garden. And they make something and it stays in the shed at the bottom of their garden because they don't necessarily have the skills to sell it or to even make sure that they made something that fixed the problem that the person who had identified the why said this needed to fix. And of course, on top of that, when you get funding, you got me on a roll now. When you get funding, the funding says, research the problem. Here's $100,000, research the problem. They might say, here's another $100,000 to say why the problem exists, and you academics can go and do that, and then you can bring that back to us, and then there's a 4-year cycle, and by that time we've got to another government, maybe. But what they never do is then they never go, here's $100,000 to find out what the problem is, here's $100,000 to find out why the problem exists, and here's $100,000 to actually put a solution into place. And we never do that because everybody is just interested in that first cycle, which is we're going to do a grassroots study and then into all the problems. So please, disabled people, tell us what your problems are. And disabled people who've been doing this for 30 years are going, 40 years, they're going, I've done about 8 of those. And I kind of fed up with you just asking me what the problem is, because I've told you the problem 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I told you what the problem was. The problem's obvious. I'll even tell you why the problem exists. Can we fix it now? That's where the entrepreneur comes in.
And I think that's so interesting because here in the United States, the Americans with Disability Act just hit its 30th anniversary. I remember being a young child in school and people saying, this is going to change your life forever. This legislation is going to change your life forever because we've identified the problem and we now know why. And so somebody's going to do something about this, but we never got to the how. It's fascinating. And that's what kind of brings us together, right? That's what makes you and I kindred spirits, because we're both how people. We're what and why as well. In fact, I think you're probably the why as well. I'm more the how, like, let's just get stuff done.
Yeah.
You know, how can I fix this problem? But that's what really brought us together, was this idea of how we can tackle these problems, and being a solution leader, not a thought leader, right?
Yeah.
So with that in mind, kind of tell us about your solution, because I think you've really done something interesting with Welcome, your company, that addresses that how in such a unique way. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, we could sort of field it in a hospitality sort of setting, but I think what I'll do is give you a little bit of background first, because it comes from the what, or it comes from the what. It then moved into the why, and then moved into the how. So it did follow through that cycle, but it did it over a period of 25 years. So in 96, I joined Guide Dogs for the Blind, leader dogs or seeing eye dogs, and I basically trained to become a mobility instructor, where I was training blind people with their guide dogs. And part of that was obviously training the dog, and then training the person how to use the dog out on the street. But then a large proportion of that was, once the person had qualified with the dog and they actually had destinations to go to. So when they went home, they were going, right, I need to go to the doctor, I need to go to the cinema, I want to go to the restaurant, I want to go to the shops. And you'd then follow them on those routes. They would have the skills that they needed to do the route. But then when they got there, you were rolling a dice as to how the staff member interacted with them. So I found myself more often than not going up to the staff member after an interaction and saying to the staff member, next time you meet somebody who's disabled or visually impaired or a guide dog owner, could you make sure you do this, 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 and this? So I would be training them after they'd had an interaction. And over a period of time, I just started thinking, well, actually, isn't it better if I just run ahead of my client, or if I speak to the staff member before my client speaks to them? Because if I could train them 5 minutes before my client walks through the door, well, I could give them the information they need. And generally speaking, when you're meeting and greeting a disabled person, there's only maybe 4 or 5 things you need to do. And it's different for different types of people, and different disabilities and different requirements. But generally speaking, if you say, hello, my name is, I am the, you're going to get off to a better start than, all right, mate, how can I help you? Because, yeah, but I was like, that, all right, mate, how can I help you? Was like, well, if I could let somebody know what my needs were as a disabled person, I could also let them know how I want them to help me. So I'm here to buy this. I've come to see my doctor. I want to watch a movie. I'd like to eat this thing. I'd like to buy this stuff. I'd like to visit that place. Whatever it might be. I could let you know before I arrived. Well, as a mobility instructor, I was running ahead, but I thought, well, it's not scalable. But at the same time, I had people turning up to train with their guide dogs 2008, and they would take out their iPhone and it would talk to them. And I thought eventually, like, it was a very slow falling coin, but I was like, wouldn't it be good if my client could communicate with a venue they're going to? And what if they could set up a profile in this service, and that profile was the same in any venue that they went, because ultimately they're just basically saying, I want you to not distract my guide dog, or I'm wanting you to make sure that you have a light on your face instead of behind you if you're somebody's deaf, or somebody saying, I don't want you to touch my wheelchair, or I want to take your arm, or I want you to introduce yourself, or I want to do whatever it is. I can let that person know before I arrive as a disabled person. And that's scalable if you do it digitally. So 2015, I left Guide Dogs and I created Welcome, which remarkably was the world's first proximity-based staff training tool. So disabled person trains the staff member, or reminds them of the training they've had in the past, which is even better, and we'll come on to that in a minute, but makes sure that the disabled person is in control of the interaction, and the system that they use actually trains the staff member before they walk through the door. And that training can be the staff member understanding that if there isn't a ramp in the building, that they can meet them at the bottom of the stairs and take them next door for a coffee to talk about the thing that they want to buy. So you can then get round the discriminatory items that you have within that building that might have been really challenging to address, but now you can address by doing something else because you have an understanding of the need. So that's what Welcome does. It is basically the ability for the disabled person to communicate directly with the venue that they're going to and let them know how best to help them when they arrive.
That reminds me a lot of, like, my wife doesn't go into the grocery store anymore. She orders it all online and then tells, the grocery store that she's on her way. They bring all the stuff out to her. It's a similar situation, right? Where the client can let the property, the business, whatever, know, hey, I'm on my way. And that's when the process is cued in terms of, the experience, right? So tell me a little bit about training, because that's one of the things that, as a disability consultant, I'm sure you get this all the time. People ask me, what kind of training do you offer? And you do it a little different way. Can you just kind of explain that?
Well, so there's quite a famous guy that a lot of your listeners and viewers will have heard of called Henry Ford. Henry Ford obviously made the Ford Motor Car Company and he had invented production ways of producing the cars. But one of the most famous quotes I believe came from Henry Ford was, if I'd asked them what they'd have wanted, they'd have said faster horses. Okay, people weren't saying give me a car; they were saying give me a horse or a faster horse. And he innovated and made something that was more efficient than horses. But of course, people don't ask for stuff that they don't know exists. And the more I looked at this around the problem of the horses that existed, and the horses that existed was the staff training, because we were really just ticking a box with the staff training. Because when you scratch the surface and you look at the effectiveness of training, and if we just say bulk standard training, not the very best training, but just bulk standard training. If I was to teach somebody how to say hello, my name is in ASL, American Sign Language, and then I left them for a year or even 2 weeks and then said, could you show me what it was that I showed you last year? There's a very good chance they're not going to remember. And that's because of a thing called, his name was Ebinger. And he was I think it was Hermann Ebinger. And he was a German scientist. And he basically discovered a thing called I think it's was it the half-life? I forgot what it's called.
The forgetting curve.
A getting curve, that's it. Yeah, it's like a half-life of learning, or a forgetting curve. Thanks.
You've already forgotten.
I have just proved it. So yeah, perfect. So yeah, the forgetting curve, and the forgetting curve is within 24 hours, there's a very good chance you've lost 50% of what you've been taught, 50 to 75% of what you've been taught. So we're living in a world where staff training for anything or teaching for anything, if it's just done in a bulk standard way, means you're going to lose it. And when I say bulk standard, if you are training, if I'm a non-disabled person going into a room with non-disabled people and training those non-disabled people on the importance of interacting with a disabled person, I've lost a lot of the color that could come with if I was a disabled person teaching a group of non-disabled people and showing them what the challenges were. And if I then went back the following day and then did more training with them and reinforced that training and then went back the following week and then 2 weeks later, well, for a start, that's not going to happen because the company only has a certain amount for staff training, and they're just going to spend that, and it's just going to disappear. So traditional training is, I'm training you, I'll deliver the training, and I'll be back next year, and we'll do some more. Now, I do the training, I go, my responsibility has gone. Do I care how well that training is put into practice when it comes to it's nothing to do with me anymore. I'll be back next year because I know I'm on a retainer or whatever it might be. So there's no real connection from the trainer to the end result. So it's the three parties here that we're working with. We've got the person who's the recipient, like the customer. We've got the staff member and we've got the trainer. And currently, the trainer and the staff member talk, and then the trainer disappears, and then everything is down to the staff member and the visitor. And this person, trainer, is not involved at all. So what we did with Welcome was we actually involved the trainer in this scenario. So that it's a three-way split again, because when the visitor interacts with the staff member, afterwards, they give feedback to the trainer as to how well they interacted. And the trainer that can then talk to the staff member and say, yeah, you need to do more of this, you need to do more of that. And because the way our system works is every single time a disabled person uses our platform, it reinforces the training that the staff member has had originally, if please they were trained by a disabled person rather than a non-disabled person training non-disabled people. There's a lot to it, because there's many reasons why the reinforcement and how you deliver the reinforcement is important. But we looked at that and went, do you know what? We can actually reinforce by the professionals, i.e. the disabled people, going in and contextualizing every interaction they have in a real life situation. And that is the best way to actually deliver training.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't you also, when the person initiates the visit and says, I'm on my way to the cinema or I'm on my way to the store or whatever, that staff member has an opportunity through your platform to actually review training right then and there, a quick refresher or cliff notes version of what they need to know, right, to interact with that customer.
Exactly that. So let's just imagine a situation where somebody has epilepsy and they're going to a cinema and they want the staff member to have a bit more of an understanding of epilepsy, or they just want to make sure that the staff member knows about epilepsy. That person might not have any need for the staff member to interact at all when they're actually at the cinema. But if they would have a seizure, then it'd be kind of nice to know that somebody actually had an understanding. So if I have epilepsy and I say I'm going to that cinema, the people at the cinema, when I'm booking my ticket, get a message that says, oh, this person would like you to have a bit more of an understanding of epilepsy. And there's a link there to a video on what to do if somebody was to have an epileptic seizure while they were in the cinema. Now, if I watch that 3 or 4 times a year, there's a very good chance I'm not going to need to watch that video again, because I've reinforced it and I've got around that training problem that we had before. So, the ability to say I'm coming can trigger all of the reminders and the refreshers and the aid memoirs, the crib sheets that you need to actually remind you every single time. Now, 4 or 5 times a year would be great. If you did it 20 times a year, the more disabled people using this, the better it is for staff members to have an understanding of disability. And the more disabled people in society, the more those people will improve their understanding anyway.
Yeah, another thing that I was thinking about when you were explaining the situation with the 3 parties, right? You've got the trainer, you've got the staff member, and then the customer is, as a person with disabilities, I'm normally the only one prepared for that interaction. Take away the trainer for just a minute. If I show up to a hotel because that's my world, or a store, what have you, I have zero confidence. I'll just be honest. And maybe a little controversial here, but let's be honest. I have zero confidence that they're going to get my interaction correct. If I have special needs in my world, for instance, hospitality, are they going to make sure my room is correct? Do they even know what a accessible room is, right? So in that instance, all of the weight goes on the customer herself, which puts you in just a perilous, stressful position as you're walking in to do something you enjoy, whether it's watching a movie or buying, clothing or buying a meal, whatever, enjoying a meal. So you have all that stress walking into it. But to be able to interact with a staff member who, A, knows you're coming, and is ready for you, so he can say, hello, Mr. Clapper, it's so nice to see you today. I'm glad you chose our venue for whatever, versus, hi, I'm Mike Clapper, I have a reservation, and then I get that blank stare. Something I talk about all the time in hospitality is, I get that deer in the headlocks, you know, oh crap. I'll be honest. Oh crap look.
Yeah, well, we're
I
expecting
don't
someone
know how
who's
to handle the situation.
yeah,
So bringing that pre-arrival sequence is so huge and so unique to me. I'm just very impressed. When you showed me the system, I was just blown away with like, why hasn't anyone done this before?
all the
So
best ideas. I mean, we've all spent our lives going, I wish I'd thought of that. Well, this was
yeah.
the thing that I thought of, but it took me 18 years to really come up with it because I'd been with guide dogs that amount of time. But you're so
Mm.
right. This should not be down to the disabled person. And there's a reason for that. The disabled people that we see in society are the tip of the iceberg. They're the most efficient, capable, the guys and girls that will roll with the punches. They will take the criticism. They will be like, I just deal with it because I have to. But there is an entire iceberg of people under the surface, disabled people who are so anxious that they won't go out. Or they went out and they got punched a few times by this situation happening, and they just went, do you know what? I'm not prepared to do that anymore. I'm just going to order online. I'm just going to sit at home. I'm going to be depressed, or I'm just not prepared to go there anymore. And that's no use, because if the top of the iceberg is 5% of the money that should be getting spent, there's a serious amount of money that isn't getting spent underneath the surface, and we need to get to those people. And I love the idea. I mean, this is the key to me. It's like, if I use this system once and I'm with a carer or a professional, and we set this system up together, and I go, let's just say it's a child with a mother, and I'm buying a pair of trainers, and I would go in with my mother and buy the trainers, and I would stand next to my mother, and my mother would buy the trainers, and then I would leave and I would come out the shop, and I've not learned anything. And my mother's thinking, he can't do it. He's just never going to be able to do it. But if you use a system like this, together with my mother, we set up that I'm going to be buying trainers. I press send. That goes through to the staff member. I then stand next to my mother in the shop, and the staff member looks at me and goes, Gavin, I know you're buying a new pair of Nikes and in blue, but I've also got some really nice red ones here. These are within your budget. These ones are slightly outside your budget, but maybe you could save up for them next time, or I can maybe interest you in these that are actually within your budget, or you could get 2 pairs of these. But the staff member's talking to me, and my mother's standing next to me, but within the system it said, talk to Gavin. The next time, the mother stands at the door and goes, you've got this, Gav, you've got this. Gavin goes in on his own, and she's watching from the door and goes in, and the staff member goes, yeah, got those trainers for you. Here we go, Gavin. And Gavin walks out and goes, I can do this. I can do this myself. I don't need my mum here. And the mother's standing at the door and going, he can do this. There'll be a day when I'm not around. He can do it. And I don't need to be there. I could check, I could help, but I can do that from home. I could do that from another country, for God's sake. So I see it as a system that could help countless disabled people go from dependence to independence, just by using a system like this, where they're getting the support that they might get from a professional, but those professionals are too few and far between. The money's not there to pay for them. There's just too many people that need those professionals. We need to find ways to innovate, to actually improve on the systems that exist now, because they're not working. We have to improve.
So playing devil's advocate for a minute, and I say to you, Gavin, I love this concept. You've really inspired me to treat people, because I hear that all the time as well. Oh, what an inspiration you are. This is wonderful.
On me.
But nothing ever happens, right? Tell me the impact you've seen, because you've implemented this across the UK and have many businesses using this. I'm not even talking financial. Tell me about the impact you're seeing from those businesses that are doing this for their customers, their disabled customers.
We've got a different source of business. So I've got a university in the north of England, and they didn't have any customers using Welcome last year. but they said they kept it. They went, we want to keep it because the training platform within it means my staff can always just go in and check on the information, whether we've got people using it or not. And then we have another venue where it was 120, it's just a small museum, had 120 people use it last year. And every single person who used it let the venue know about their needs before they arrived. They didn't just let them know about their disability, or they could say they didn't need to share their disability. They could say just a general awareness. But we also knew the data on that told us how many were mobility impaired, how many were hearing impaired, whether somebody wanted the accessible toilet, whether somebody wanted the changing places toilet, whether somebody needed a mobility vehicle when they got, or a mobility vehicle when they got there, whether somebody had an issue with a member of staff, and we collect all of that data anonymously. And the staff members of the venue goes, my God, we have never collected information like this before. Also, we can ask somebody, what did you buy today? Did you make a purchase? Would you come back again and make another purchase? What is it you loved about the store this time? How could we improve? What could we do better next time? So the data that we're collecting is equally as important as everything else. So you've got the opportunity to make more money, but even more than that, you've got the opportunity to know how you could make even more money. Imagine an airport where you might have 1,000 people use this. You go, do you know what? We've put so much money into seeing eye dogs, and we only had 2 last year. And yet we had 300 people who are neurodiverse. Do you think maybe we should put a little bit more money into neurodiversity? But nobody's collecting that. They go for the big brand names. They go, oh, it's a guide dog. Yeah, brilliant. Well, get a photograph of a guide dog. And they will go for that because they see that as a high impact. But ultimately, data doesn't go with the high impact. It goes with the need. And we're able to collect that. And nobody's ever really done that before because people with hidden disabilities don't share them. Vast majority of disabled people have hidden disabilities, or they have a disability that's visible, but also a hidden disability. So a wheelchair user who's neurodiverse, a guide dog owner who's also hearing impaired. So there are plenty of reasons to collect this data and to use that system for that purpose.
That is so surprising that nobody's collecting that data. Of course, I guess if they do, it's probably stuck in some university somewhere in the Y person, right? In some laboratory or classroom environment that goes, I've collected, all of this data and it's interesting, and then it never goes anywhere. That's really fascinating. And I think you hit on something really important. So many people look at disability as a mobility impairment, or maybe a seeing impairment, a vision impairment, or hearing impairment. But with the way the world is today, hidden disabilities and neurodivergency and all of these things are so prevalent these days. It's just amazing to me that this tool and what we both do in terms of innovating in the space is just a vast audience that can really benefit from all this. It's just amazing.
And it's so much more than benefit. There's a level of humanity when there is equity within the service provision. The wheelchair user who can get into the building and sit at the desk and do software development is equally as good as anybody else, but can't do it if he can't get into the building. But I think you raise an important point there about the spread, or not even the spread, the awareness of disability now. If you mention the word access to somebody in hospitality who's maybe not that literate in disability terms, they probably think doors, lifts, parking, counters, maybe toilets. They won't be thinking access from the point of view of neurodiversity or hearing impairment or schizophrenia or cerebral palsy or whatever. They are purely thinking of access as physical. So most people are providing physical solutions, and annoyingly, physical solutions are actually the most expensive. So they will stop people from even engaging in the lowest level. But the best you can possibly do is actually train staff. And of course, that's expensive, and the forgetting curve means that you train them and the information's gone, or the staff member goes. So you do the training, and then the staff member leaves. So it's not just about the forgetting. You've got a turnover, and hospitality, tourism, entertainment, then leisure, the high turnover of staff. Retail, massive turnover of staff. So you train them, they leave, you're back to square one again.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem to have, but you have a great solution for it. And man, it's just great to talk to you as always about this. I think that if we I want to kind of just bring it back to hospitality at the end of the day, travel at the end of the day, because that's what I do and that's what this podcast is all about. Although I love having these discussions, I love the fact, just in general, that last episode we had a boutique hotel owner on, and we talked all about boutique hospitality, and today we're talking all about disability. This is what the world needs more of, and so it's just been an honor to have you. But back to the whole travel side of this, the travel here in the U.S. is, I hammer this home all day long, is the $100 billion market, right? But you touched on something so important that I've been meaning to get back to, which is, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think people assume that's the ceiling that everyone needs to fight after. But the truth of the matter is, if that's $100 billion in spend here in the U.S. every year, how much more is submersed underneath that water, right? And so I just can't believe that people are looking at this as something that is not scalable. It's just amazing to me.
It has to be, but we need to prove it. We could say to them, you must do it because it's the right thing to do, which, let's face it, that's what we've been doing for many, many years now. The right thing to do, the nice to haves are usually the first thing you get rid of when push comes to shove. The commerce guys need to see some income generation. If they see income generation, they will never get rid of it. There is a responsibility on disabled people here to use the services that provide the service, to shout about the people that are doing good work. Because, and we've seen this across the world since the dawn of time, people will move society through their use of society. They will move it. If we sit here and just say, that's not working, and point out, and the media love it when we point out the people that don't do a good job. But if all we do is that, and never talk about the guys doing brilliant work, then we will never be able to promote the fact that somebody's found it. And I would say to those guys, you need the data. You need to be able to say, we spent this and we got this, and it's the last thing we will get rid of because we are making money out of this. And I know people in the UK that are doing that, and I know America can do it as well. We can do it all around the world. It's not easy, and we do need disabled people to be using their purple pound and proving it. And very quickly, I would just say, if somebody gives you great service, don't just say thank you and then say, wasn't that brilliant service? Say, that was brilliant service. Could you explain to me why you gave me good service? What processes are in place that actually meant that you gave me good service? Because they might say something like, oh, my dad's a wheelchair user, or my mum's visually impaired, or my son's autistic. And if that's the case, there's a very good chance that the next staff member isn't delivering that level of service because it's being delivered because of the personal knowledge of that individual. Whereas if you say to them, why did you do great service today? And the person says, well, our manager has taken on board this process, is now delivering this, and it means that every single time somebody uses this, we get reminded on blah, blah, blah. Well, that's a process. And that could be sustainable. That could be there forever. The person whose daughter is autistic leaves, you're back at square one, and you're back at the start, somebody having a problem and then complaining and then saying, social media, this is what the problem is. And it happens every day.
That's so true. We're such an exclusive club, right? Just like any other kind of minority group in the world, right? We pat each other on the back, or we give each other a special wink, and it's because we know. I think that's such an important thing, right? We know these things. We know what it's like. We know what it's like to walk in somebody else's shoes, or in my case, roll in somebody else's shoes, right?
Yeah.
And the more we get this out there, the more impact we can make for everybody. And it's a rising tides lift all boats kind of thing, right? This is not just, do it because it's the moral imperative, do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because everyone benefits. And so
Yeah.
I think we'll just leave it right there. But before we do that, please give everyone your social media handles and ways to get a hold of you, so that if they're interested in welcome or just interested in having a great conversation, reach out to Gavin. He's the man. So
Well,
what's the best way to get a hold of you?
the best way to get hold of me is to talk to Mike. Because Mike's got all this information, and if you're tuning in every week, then Mike's going to be there. You can contact him and talk to him about me, and that's brilliant. But if you want to, LinkedIn is where I sort of chat most, and I do lots of articles on Medium and stuff like that. But it's just Gavin Neate on LinkedIn, Neate, Gavin, Neate, and I'm more than happy to communicate with people on there. But the company's called Welcome. But if somebody wanted to go to our website, and sounds a bit weird, but it's a really great website, wel-co.me. That's well-co.me. And that takes people to our website. Now, I'm not a massive fan of our website because what we do is incredibly sophisticated under the surface, but it should be a hell of a lot more simple to say. It's just, would you like to know somebody who's about to arrive before they arrive? That's what we do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And to your point about your Medium articles, this is going to come out next Friday today. So that's January 29th. Gavin just posted a great Medium article that I read today on the forgetting curve. And
is that what it's called?
that's what it's called. So I encourage you to go read that, because that was really just informative to me, and I was like, wow, how interesting that was something I wanted to bring up with you in this conversation, and you published an article on it today. So everyone, thank you for joining in. Gavin, thank you so much for being here. I know it's late. We're approaching the midnight hour for you, so maybe next time we should do this over a pint of beer or something like that. But thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gavin, and we will see you next time here on the Inclusion in Your Lab. Take care, everyone.